we talk about continental philosophy, a lot of it is about identity and who we are and how we're embodied. If you're strong, you have one take on the world. If you're weak, you have another. It sounds almost basic to us these days, but still in philosophy, it's something that's grappled with a lot.
Yeah, definitely. That's such a big divide in Western philosophy in general. Basically, just this idea of dualism that we were talking about before. That there's this essential divide between the body and the mind, but like in reality, they're really the same thing. Like the mind is part of the body, and it's not one problem that I eventually noticed with dualism is that there's often this praise of the mind as being superior to the body, and this sort of puritanical mindset of, like, if you focus on your body and you enjoy things to do with your body, then that is for some reason inferior to intellectual pursuits that you do with your mind, and that is a more moral pursuit even.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that split it's in common language, isn't it? It's in a lot of ways that we embrace the world. But it's also, I mean, for Husserl, and this is where Heidegger comes in and changes Husserl, takes phenomenology in another direction. But Husserl has this as well, that in many ways our basic relationship with the world isn't conscious. And that's something that hadn't really been encountered by philosophy before, which thought consciousness was in charge. Hegel would say consciousness was in charge. Exactly the duality you're talking about: consciousness superior, the body inferior. But Heidegger, to take a Heideggerian example, Heidegger said, when you're opening a door, you're going through a doorknob, turn the doorknob, go through the door, close the door behind you. According to a sort of Cartesian, Kantian, basically the whole history of philosophy up to then theory, you would walk towards the door, you would recognize it's a door, you would look at the doorknob, you would recognize it's a doorknob, think through how it functions, you would put out your hand is this independent thing apart from your body, apart from your mind, you would turn the doorknob, you would then think through other experiences of opening doors and so forth, pull the door open, go through the door, you would be in another space, and your mind would be sitting in your body, experiencing that space. You'd shut the door, all those things. We don't do that. We just walk up.
We just do that automatically without even thinking of it.
The body does it. The mind is not involved in that process. While I was talking to you just then, I've done 50 things, right from my heart beating to moving my hands around to having a drink or whatever, none of which went through my consciousness at all. And Heidegger uses another great example, which is using a hammer. And I love this because he kind of tries to look at what philosophy has done and what philosophy is. He says, if you're using a hammer and you're hitting a nail and it's working perfectly, the other example is driving a car. It's working perfectly, bang, bang, bang. You don't think about it. In a sense, the hammer becomes an extension of your body. You don't think about it. When the hammer goes wrong, you miss the nail, hit your finger, or if you're driving a car, when you crash the car, that is when you think about the hammer as an object in the world. That is when you start to do what philosophy does. People generally just live in the world and exist in the world and absolutely fine and don't think about it. When they do philosophy, they step back and start to treat the world as a series of objects. We don't actually do that in real life. And that was a huge part of Husserl's sort of leap forward in phenomenology, where he said philosophical thinking is valid and all of those things, but it's also a way of encountering the world which is not natural. It's valid because we want to work these problems out, but that's not actually how we encounter the world. And I'm not talking about sitting there thinking about philosophy and thinking about politics and so forth, but I'm talking about that move where philosophy says there are objects out there and there's a consciousness in here. That's what existence is. That's not how we experience the world. We do not do that. The world is part of us in some sense. And so that was kind of Husserl's other huge insight, that our existence within the world is the primary way we do that is through encounters with the world and through taking it on, but it's not treating it as an object. And certainly, and this was another thing that Husserl really grappled with and maybe got right, maybe got wrong, certainly we are not an object in the world. We never think of ourselves as objects in the world, apart from when we're doing philosophy, or when we're getting ready for a date, or I know you do some weights. When you're doing a weight, you might look at your body and go, I put on this weight. These are the various circumstances. Or people with diets and stuff, we think of the body as an object. Actually, we don't live the body as an object. We just are in the body, and it does what it does most of the time without us really thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that's a very powerful insight as well from Husserl, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like you were talking about, like that's how we inhabit the world. Like we inhabit the world like inside our bodies. Like it's not like we would be conscious of our place in the world, because we're not like we're a separate part of the world, but we're existing within the world. So it's like that analogy of a fish swimming in water, like it feels natural. So it's not, because you don't have anything else to compare it to, because that's your experience of living life.
Yeah, absolutely. And Husserl used the term life world for that. Sartre, in particular, ran with this board. Kind of, there's a great thing in his war diaries, Sartre's war diaries. Sartre, again, the whole French tradition is based on Husserl in many ways, and he talks about psychogeographies. It's just a journal, so he's just trying to list some things, and he talks about the fact that his neighbor's house is not close to him, because he doesn't encounter his neighbor. He doesn't know him. The place he used to go as a child is close to him, in his sensibility, because he has this connection with it. He thinks Paris is there because that's kind of his idea of direction, even though he knows it's geographically on the other side. And he thinks this is there because an ex-girlfriend lives there. And so you have this kind of encounter with the world. Our map of the world does not in any way map onto a folded map of the world, and we all have that, and that's a very Husserlian idea that what goes on in our encounters with the world, our experience of the world that we describe, doesn't have the sort of formal properties of a map or of philosophy, which I think is fascinating.